Marketing is about values.
Nike didn't call me and sell me this in a catalog. I bought this swoosh because it's ingrained in my soul.
When you have a product that really resonates with customers, the word of mouth grows like wildfire.
Welcome to the MarketingMax show. Now, let's dive in.
Welcome to the very first episode of the MarketingMax show. My name is Logan Lyles. I am going to be the co-host of the show along with, well, you guessed it, MarketingMax. Max, welcome, man. It's good to be here with you.
I would say thank you for having me, but it's my show. For context, everybody, I was on about 15 or 20 different podcasts last year. I launched my podcast maybe a year and a half ago. I never really stuck with it, but I was a guest on 15 last year and I loved being a guest. And Logan was one of the hosts of one of the 15 or 20 podcasts that I was on. And I just thought he was the best at asking questions. He had the most knowledge about marketing specifically of anyone. And almost all of the podcasts I was on were marketing podcasts. And so I thought, in 2025, I want to bring back the podcast. And I don't want to interview a bunch of people and just ask the same questions. How did you get your start? And whatever. I wanted to go deeper. And so I was looking for a co-host of the MarketingMax show. And I just thought, Logan's so damn good. And it was such a fun conversation. And we actually really uncovered good, practical, step-by-step practical things. And I was like, Logan, do you want to hang out with me for 30 minutes every week in 2025 and shoot the shit about marketing? And luckily he said yes. So that's why we're here.
Yeah.
And
well, for folks who know me, they know it is hard for me to turn down being a guest on a podcast, hosting a podcast, and co-hosting a podcast. I've actually been a big believer that a lot of folks in marketing, especially B2B, should lean into this style of co-hosted commentary because, like you were saying, Max, the one-on-one interview is kind of getting a little bit stale. There's ways to spice that up and those sorts of things. And I've done a lot of those. This is actually my 8th podcast, believe it or not, that I have hosted in some form or fashion. Wow. But in this format will be a bit new because I think it allows us to go a little bit deeper. Like every episode, we're not kind of starting from scratch, but to let people know, it's not going to be just kind of all over the place. So Max, you and I have talked about this. We're going to have some recurring themes. So if you're a new listener, whether you're joining us right at the launch of the show, or if you just found the show and you're backing up to the first episode, this is kind of what you can expect. Now we'll tinker with it a bit. We're going to cover, trends, which right now we're recording January 2025. So looking back at 2024, looking ahead at potential trends in 25 is top of mind. So that's a segment we'll probably cover. Also, we're going to have one that Max came up with called CMO of. So basically, we'll start with a question of, Max, if you were the CMO of, whatever, Apollo.io, right now, what would you do, based on this or whatever? Business idea of the week. Some of those will pull from some of your X threads or the newsletter. And then what I'm really excited about is the mailbag, where we're going to be taking your questions, your scenarios, anything you want to pose to us and have us either riff on, break down, or answer a specific question. We'll have ways for you to submit questions to the mailbag. So that's kind of what we're going with. But before we get into the segments for today's episode, the very first one, Max, let's have you and I both kind of give people a sense of our background, what we're up to these days. A lot of people know you from your newsletter, and I'm sure that'll be part of what you share here. But kick us off with a little bit of an introduction on yourself to set the context, and I'll do the same as well.
Yeah. Well, I covered this in one of the 10 previous episodes that I did like a year ago, and it was actually our number one downloaded, most listened to episode. My full backstory, I'll try to compress it into a minute or so. Super long story short, I actually got my start on Wall Street, helping early stage companies raise capital in order to grow and rise up the ranks at this very small investment bank that I was at that actually doesn't even exist anymore. I needed to pass the Series 7 exam. I was a terrible test taker, but really good at a lot of other things. And I royally bombed the Series 7 exam. I got like a 52 or 53%. When I needed like a 72% to pass. I'm just a terrible test taker. I'm just not good at that. And 2 weeks later, one of the clients that I was helping raise a $5 million Series A round for looked at me in the face after an investor meeting and said, will you run my Facebook ads? And I had no experience running Facebook ads, Google ads. I said, why do you want me? And she says, well, every agency I hire sucks. And you're really good at helping me raise, millions of dollars at a time. I feel like you'd be pretty good at helping me raise, $50 at a time per customer. And this was back in 2016 when the cost to advertise in front of 1,000 people on Facebook was literally $1 or $2. Now,
Those were the days, huh?
Yeah, now it's like $30-$50 to get in front of 1,000 people on Facebook. And she gave me $2,000 in ad spend. I turned her $2,000 in ad spend into $20,000 in collected revenue, not lifetime value or anything, just collected revenue in 2 weeks after getting ads live. Immediately hooked on, I don't even know if you know that story. You're looking surprised.
No,
But,
this is genuine reaction. I'm not hamming it up for the audience today.
Yeah. And that's total side note is like Logan and I actually don't know each other all that well. We've slacked a little bit over the last few weeks planning this, and we had an episode together, but we're going to get to know each other through this journey as well. But yeah, long story short, I was immediately hooked on Facebook ads, Google ads. I went to Barnes & Noble on Fifth Avenue in New York City. If you live in New York and you're familiar with that, it's a huge Barnes & Noble, one of the few that still exists to this day, 2025. And I bought every book I could on SEO and conversion rate optimization and signed up a couple other clients at the investment bank, found similar successes, quit my career on Wall Street, hung up the suit and tie, as I like to say, and then spent the next 5 years bootstrapping my performance marketing agency to 15 full-time employees, obviously 7 figures in revenue. Sold it 3 years ago to a private equity fund that was doing a roll-up of a bunch of niche specialized agencies. And then I started building my brand online as MarketingMax. And that's what you guys all know and maybe love or hate. Who knows? That's the genesis story.
Yeah, to be determined. Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah. When we first met, I was hosting the podcast Agency Life for teamwork.com, where I was for a couple of years. And I heard, a little bit of, well, not a little bit, a really good story about, where you pivoted your agency, where you went from kind of being full service to really niching down, how that led you to your exit. And I agree with you. It was one of the best episodes of the 50 or so I did on that podcast because we were able to unpack a specific story. We were able to make it applicable and get tactical. Several years back, I hosted a podcast called B2B Growth, one of the top marketing podcasts out there, especially in B2B, still running to this day from my shout out to my friends over at Sweetfish. But one thing I hated about hosting that show was having CMOs and VPs of marketing on, and they would say, well, I can keep this really high level. And I would tell them, please don't do that. And here's why, because you're going to sound exactly like the last guest and the last guest and the one before that and every other kind of generic hot take or bland piece of advice that we get in our LinkedIn feed. We want to get tactful. So I have every confidence that we're going to be able to do that between you and I on the show. And if you're listening or watching, keep us honest. Let us know in the mailbag. It's not just for questions for that segment, but feedback. Hey, try out this segment. We're going to iterate on this as we go. So I am super pumped. For folks who don't know me, other than my name that I dropped at the beginning of the episode, I've been in B2B sales and marketing since 2008 when I graduated college with a journalism degree and quickly hit the job market and was like, okay, there are very few photojournalism jobs out there. They don't pay that much. And this industry is contracting, very rapidly. So I immediately got into sales because I was married early, had a young family. I was like, I could actually make enough money to provide for a family this way. I originally hated sales with a passion, but I learned to find my spot in it, to learn how to take my love of teaching and apply that to sales. But for the next 10 years or so, I was in technology sales, but I was always that salesperson who loved marketing because I saw where marketing was going with content. And I was like, that's a lot of what I learned in journalism school. I really wish I could get into that. And so 10 years later, 2018, I stepped into a marketing agency where I got to sell to marketers and host a podcast, B2B Growth, that I mentioned earlier. And I was like, man, this is it. Like, I get to be part salesperson, part marketer, because I never felt I've never, even to this day, felt fully comfortable with just one of those hats on. And so today, I actually wear 2 hats. I'm director of growth at Business Builders, which is a digital marketing agency. And what the problem we solve there is most people know that marketing, it can be boiled down to 3 steps: plan, produce, and promote. But if we're really being honest, we spend a lot of time producing content and promoting it without a really solid plan. And so since 2018, I believe at Business Builders, we've been StoryBrand certified, and we use that framework to help people build the right messaging and the right plan for their marketing so that they're not spending a ton of wasted energy producing and promoting things that aren't actually driving business results. And then at the same time, I'm also leading content and community in a peer-to-peer community called Agency Builders, where we have a ton, I think 300 now, digital marketing agency owners and founders in there swapping notes, the occasional referral. We've got content in there that is specific, not just to marketing, but to running and maintaining an agency. So kind of wearing both of those hats. And I imagine there will be folks in the audience who are maybe they've lived both lives, in-house marketer or entrepreneur or, agency side. So hopefully I can bring some perspective to both of those. So that's a little context on both of us. Anything there, Max, before we dig in? I think 2025 trends is what we're going to dig into next, but let me just pause there. We're getting started here. So let me make sure we're at a good spot.
Yeah, I two really quick things would just be, one, I didn't know your backstory at all. So this really is an interesting experiment, if you will. Two guys start a podcast, don't really know each other, but we're going to learn. I love that story. And it's funny you say you don't have like the marketing and the sales hat. You can't really pick one. Like the best marketers are really good salespeople, and the best salespeople are really good marketers. And very few people can actually go in between both. I like to think I'm maybe an 8 out of 10 in both. I don't know. Maybe not. I like to think I'm an 8 out of 10. But yeah, I don't think you need to choose one. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, Logan mentioned before the mailbag segment, there's 2 ways to submit a question. And we'll cover this at the end of the episode. We'll probably mention it every episode. But there's 2 ways to submit a question. Number 1, you can follow me on Twitter at MarketingMax, and you can just DM me. Just send me a DM. Hey, here's a question. I'll either respond to it via the DM, sometimes with a voice note, or we'll cover it on the show. Or if you go to growthdaily.com and you sign up for my newsletter, it's completely free. 117,000 people read my daily newsletter every single day. If you sign up for Growth Daily, after you give your email, we'll ask you a few questions. And one of the questions will be, do you have your own question that you would like us to talk about on the podcast? So growthdaily.com, or tweet at me or DM me. With that being said, I know we're already over the time for the intro, and we're going to try to keep all these as short as possible and impactful as possible. So Logan, let's get into the first segment of the first MarketingMax 2.0 show.
Awesome, man. Well, let's go with this. So we're going to be looking at trends, and I said 25, but we're going to look back. I love this thread that you have, 5 things proven wrong in 2024. So I'll just run through them quickly. Money back guarantees, AI generated content sucks, newsletters are easy, money, Twitter is getting bigger, and agencies suck. I've got a personal stake in number 5 because I run sales and marketing at an agency, and I run a community full of agencies. So I'm curious to hear your take on why agencies don't suck, why you think that was a thing talked about in 24, and why it was proven wrong. But let's take these in order, and we'll get back to that one. So money back guarantees. Why do you think that was proven wrong in 2024 as we jump into our trends segment, man?
Yeah, well, I think everyone at the beginning of a year or at the end of the year always writes these like, here's what to look out for in the new year.
Yeah.
And they're all so obvious. Like AI is going to be in marketing, like no duh, right? But what I like to look back at is things that people predicted 365 days ago that were wrong. Mm-hmm. And this first one, it really speaks to the concept of, wait, sorry, I totally forgot what the first one was. We don't even need to cut this out. What was the first one?
Yeah, money back guarantees.
Money back guarantees. Okay, that's right. The first one speaks to a book that was written. That's where I was going with this. The first one speaks to a book that was written by a guy named Alex Hormozi. If you don't know him, he now has like a bajillion followers on every social platform. He's ripped, long hair. He's an amazing marketer, amazing business person. I have nothing against him, but he came out with this book a couple of years ago called $100 Million Offer. And it basically is the detailed step-by-step playbook he used to grow his business and exit it for like $70 or $80 million. That business grew on the back of a money-back guarantee. And so what is a $100 million offer? It's a money-back guarantee. And because he was working with gyms, the deal was, if you don't lose weight by X amount of time, or if you don't gain enough muscle or whatever that gym wanted to promote or really wanted to help their clients with, their members with, then you'd get a money back guarantee. You'd get your money back if you don't hit that goal. But the caveat is you have to show up a certain amount of times to a certain amount of classes, or you have to eat a certain way. And everyone read that book. He's an amazing writer. I don't have anything wrong with the strategy or the book at all, but everyone read that book, kind of got glossy-eyed that this strategy is the way to grow any sort of B2B service business or any sort of business in really any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And they started cold emailing, cold LinkedIn messaging, running Facebook ads saying, if I don't generate you 30 leads in 30 days, your money back, or if I don't, whatever. And it flooded our market of agency world and consulting world and bookkeepers and accountants and all this stuff with this money back guarantee. And why was that proven wrong in 2025? Well, halfway through the year, you started to notice a lot less cold emails and ads and posts with the money back guarantee. And the reason for that is because it attracts the wrong type of client. Money back guarantee takes the risk out of it for the client. No questions asked. That's great. But sometimes you actually can't guarantee success. And sometimes you want to work with clients who are not penny pinching. When you work with a client that's only signing up because there's no risk, they're not a smart business person typically. No offense to anyone that is listening to this. That's like, I wouldn't sign up with anything if there wasn't a guarantee, but there's no guarantees in life. You have to take risks. The most successful entrepreneurs of all time took huge risks. If you listen to the Elon Musk biography, oh my God, this guy took so many risks.
Yeah.
You don't have to take as many risks to be him, right? But like, or as he did. But I think it just really got proven wrong that that strategy works really well for certain types of businesses, but for most businesses, it attracts the absolute wrong type of client. That's going to be the biggest headache, the biggest pain in the butt. They're not going to do what they have to do to close the leads you generate them or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so I think that was proven wrong. Forgive me if I went too long on a tangent, but
no, not at all, man. And for what it's worth, what I'll say is I really like that book, $100 million offer from Alex Hormozi. I have his second book, $100 million leads, how to get strangers to want to buy your stuff, sitting behind me. I haven't cracked that yet. I need to get into it, but I am a big fan of his. I'm not a big fan of kind of ripping and replacing and assuming that, hey, this framework, this methodology will apply exactly here in this business model. And I think you're right to call out, hey, let's look at what worked, because we're all tired of listening to, platitudes and hot takes from people who have never built anything. And I think that's why Hormozi has built a big audience, because he's built stuff. He's over and over again now. But, if you're in a service-based business like an agency, what are the upfront costs that you don't have that a gym doesn't have? What are your profit margins different than this sort of business? So I think the trend within the trend is don't always just look at trends and think you can adopt them for your business. Take a look at what's similar, what's not, those sorts of things. All right, number 2 is interesting for me. AI generated content sucks. This is one that you say is proven wrong. And I've been one of those, especially over the last year, that I just find myself as I scroll LinkedIn or whatever, or YouTube or whatever, the pendulum swings for me. Man, I'm not using AI enough to no, I try something, it doesn't really work. No, I should have just done that manually. And either one I'm doing, I oftentimes feel like I'm wasting time. And I've settled on some things that are working for me right now. And I think this is going to be a big topic of the show ongoing. But why do you think that blanket statement, though, AI generated content sucks, was false? And what do you think is actually the flip side of it?
Yeah, there seems to be two sides of the coin. Everyone's like, AI content does suck. And I'm not ready to use it for myself because it doesn't capture my tone of voice and it doesn't sound like me. Or I think most people, at least in the marketing guru space, say and preach is oh, you could just go viral on Twitter tomorrow with ChatGPT or with Claude. You can go viral on LinkedIn or all, you could create a newsletter business tomorrow that does $1 million a year and ChatGPT will just write your newsletter. And I'm hearing a lot more of that. And I think that was debunked because content written by ChatGPT, written by Claude, can be amazing if you create your own custom GPT trained on your own past writings.
Yep.
That's the big difference here. Is everyone's oh, AI content sucks. A lot of people tell me when I open up LinkedIn, I see a ton of AI generated content. It all seems the same. It all seems crap, and it all has the same lines. Here's the truth. And
post and comments now, right?
And comments for sure. I'm huge on Twitter. And that's another kind of topic I'm sure we'll get into this year is I've spent the last 3 years predominantly on Twitter, at least an hour a day on Twitter. I love Twitter, but this year I'm going to be spending more of my time on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I just think that so many people, they just open up ChatGPT, the free version. They say, can you write me a tweet about XYZ? They change 2 words, they post it, nothing happens. And then with hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of people doing that on the LinkedIn feed. And of course, you're going to think AI content sucks. But the right way to do it and the way to make it not suck is to take all of your past posts, upload it into a custom ChatGPT or a custom GPT that you can get for $20 a month on GPT, and then ask ChatGPT or Claude or whatever tool you're using to create a prompt to write as close in your style as possible. Have ChatGPT write its own prompt for itself, right? And then because you fed it 50 posts or 100 posts or whatever, the content actually can be really, really, really good. And I should say is really, 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 really good when you do that.
Yeah.
The problem is most people either don't do that or most people haven't written that first batch of 50. So what I tell people all the time is like, you write the first 50, you write the first 500, and then you could either take the best performing ones, upload those to the ChatGPT, or just take all of them and upload that. Now they have something to train on.
Exactly what I recently did, man, both with ChatGPT and with Claude. I will say Opus, even though it's an older model in Claude, tends to be a little bit better writer than Sonnet. So just quick pro tip there. And I'm by far no like AI marketing expert. If you want to follow someone who's digging deep there, my friend Dan Sanchez, who's now at Social Media Examiner, he's definitely a good follow. But he recommended to me to do exactly what you just did on LinkedIn. If you've been publishing there for a while, there's a way that you can go into your account, download all of your data, which you should do this anyway, because you have so much stuff there. And all of your contacts, your posts, even your comments, like it's crazy how much is in there. And it gives you like it calls it shares instead of posts, but it's called shares.csv. You can download that whole thing and then upload that to ChatGPT and Claude. I do encourage you to try both and say, based on this, write me a prompt to help you write in my tone of voice, and then either use that as a custom prompt or a project in Claude or a custom GPT is definitely the way to go. We'll dig deeper on AI, I'm sure, in future episodes. All right. Number 3 on your list, I know is near and dear to your heart because you run a huge newsletter at growthdaily.com. Newsletters are easy. So coming from the guy who runs a huge newsletter, why is this one false, man?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't call it huge because there's certainly much, much, much bigger ones out there. I'm a small fish to a lot of people and a big fish to a smaller amount of people.
Sure.
But
yeah,
a lot of the people listening, sure, 117,000 people reading my newsletter every day. It's not nothing for sure. I often think about it like it's literally like the amount of people in an NFL stadium, like reading my newsletter every single day. It's crazy to me, mind blowing. But Beehive, specifically the tool Beehive, if you're not familiar with it, I'm actually an investor in it. Beehive is a tool that I use to operate my whole newsletter business. It's beehiiv.com. You actually get a free trial if you have one of my codes or something. I don't know, I'll drop it in the show link or something. But Beehive made it 40 million times easier for everyone to start a newsletter for a bunch of different reasons. It was basically the guy who created the tech at Morning Brew, Tyler Dank, is an amazing founder, an amazing guy. I'm pretty friendly with him. And he went and created kind of an out-of-the-box solution for newsletters to be started and run and operated. That flooded the market with a ton of newsletters between Beehive and then Morning Brew getting sold for 75 million, The Hustle getting sold for 30-ish million, not as much cash, a lot of equity. We can get into that later. But everyone saw this as like a newsletter gold rush. I started my newsletter maybe like 6 months before everyone else really saw the opportunity. And I was making $10,000 to $15,000 a month in ad revenue with a 10,000 subscriber newsletter. Now, depending on the niche, that's really, really, really hard to do. But for me,
I was going to say, my eyebrows went up. For those just listening, like Max sit down and I'm like, hold on a second, I'm doing the math, which I don't do very quickly on the fly, but I'm like, those are pretty good numbers, right?
Yeah.
So how's that changed though, as the market's been flooded and things like that?
Well, yeah. So like after 4 or 5 months of this, and I was sold out for a long time. I had a weekly newsletter, 10 or 12,000 subscribers, and I was making 10 to 15K. I had a few tricks up my sleeve with pricing that a lot of newsletters even to this day don't do, that I've coached a lot of newsletter operators to do. But I was like, oh my God, if I had a daily newsletter and then if I had 100,000 subscribers, like 10x the subscriber count that I have, I would make 10x. I'd make $100,000 a month. And what happened was when I started, when I was making that money about 6 months before everyone else, there were a very small amount of newsletters and a rather big amount of advertisers chasing those small newsletters.
Supply and demand,
supply
right?
and demand was fantastic.
Yep.
Beehive made it way easier. Everyone started talking about it on Twitter. Like I said, the hustle and the morning brew sold for tens of millions of dollars. Everyone starts doing it. The amount of newsletters went way up, but the pool of advertisers actually stayed the same, if not shrunk a little bit. And so it's now very, very difficult and very hard to make meaningful money unless you're investing real money into good writers, not just ChatGPT. Even if you train it, like good writers, because daily content or weekly, daily content, good writers and good growth. And it's still really, really, really hard. The numbers just aren't there to make, $15,000 a month from a 10,000 subscriber newsletter, unless you have more expensive things that you're selling on the back of it. I sell agency services on the back of my newsletter now. If you're just talking about ad revenue, everyone thinks it was so easy to just spin up a newsletter, use co-registration, which is, for those of you that don't know, when you sign up for one newsletter, sometimes I might ask you, hey, we think you'll also like these 3 other newsletters. Do you want to sign up?
Oh, yeah. Kit kind of does that as well, right? Like
Yes.
your recommendation pool and stuff.
Yep. Kit has that built in. Beehive has that built in. And so a lot of people are like, oh, I can spend 70 cents, 80 cents to get a subscriber. I can drop, $8,000. I'll get 10,000 subscribers. And then Max said he was making 10 to 15K a month on a 10,000 subscriber list. Like, I'll make my money back in a month. And co-registration is the worst way to grow a newsletter, which I'm sure we'll get into over the coming weeks.
Real quick, what's one line of why you think co-registration is a terrible idea?
When someone walks in to a coffee shop and they ask for a latte, if you ask them, would you like to also buy another latte that uses almond milk instead of regular milk? What are the chances they're actually going to go drink that other latte? What are the chances they're actually going to enjoy that other latte? No, they ordered that one thing. The person signed up for one newsletter.
Amazon does it really well, though. They'll be like, oh, you should also look at this. But is that because the sophistication is just not there with co-registration with newsletters yet? Like, I'm putting you on the spot, already pushing back. You can see we're figuring out the flow here.
This is why we have you here. I would say it's different because on Amazon, it's an impulse purchase, or it's, if you purchase this thing, you might also like this other thing, versus when it's a newsletter, especially if you're a daily newsletter and you're promoting a daily newsletter, people only have so much time in the day to read newsletters. And so if I'm signing up for Max's newsletter, and it says, I want to also, would you also like to sign up for Logan's newsletter? It decreases the chances of you reading mine. Right.
Yeah.
And you're not actually signing up for Logan's newsletter. Like, you didn't get educated enough. You don't know who the hell Logan is. You don't know what he talks about. But when you sign up for my newsletter, you've listened to my podcast and you've gone to growthdaily.com to sign up. You've opened up Instagram and you've seen an ad that says, I'll send you one marketing tip every single morning for free. And then you've signed up. You have no idea what Logan got and what Logan's sending and who he is.
Yeah. And I was debating whether to on my thoughts here to keep going with the Amazon analogy or the Starbucks analogy. I guess I'll keep going with the Starbucks analogy because you said hey, here's a latte. Do you also want this latte? It's not quite like, hey, here's a latte. Would you like a scone to go with it?
Exactly.
Because you're offering them another newsletter. It's not a hey, you're signing up for this. Do you also want this guide or this template? You're offering them the same thing. And maybe there's it breaks down a little bit because maybe it's people who are interested in marketing growth tips also want productivity hacks and it's a newsletter. So maybe, but I'm coming around to your analogy there in the breakdown. And you've looked at more data of this and tested it. So yeah.
First of all, my data speaks volumes to it, and we could even do a screen share on another episode, and I can walk through open rate of a Facebook ad, open rate of another newsletter, open rate of co-reg, everything else. But I appreciate your extra color of the scone example because that is why I said another latte. Like, when you're at Chipotle, you might want a little bit of hot sauce and a little bit of medium sauce, right? And so it might work, right? You
don't want 2 burritos unless you're really hungry.
You don't want 2 of more or less the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so that's more or less what you're getting with co-reg.
Interesting.
I just don't think. I say it all the time. It's the worst way to grow a newsletter.
Awesome, man. All right. Number 4 on our list was that you saw, lots more money and growth on Twitter. For you, 2025 is going to be more about LinkedIn. Not that you're abandoning Twitter or X, but tell us a little bit about what's the transition there. What do you think the prediction that was wrong in 2024 was when it comes to X?
Yeah, X has become a habit for me. The moment I open up my phone, I'm an addict. I actually had to limit it to an hour a day on my phone and block it from 9 a.m. on Saturday mornings to 7 p.m. on Sunday evenings, which is what I do for all of my work apps like Slack and email and everything blocks on the weekends. I had to add Twitter to that. And once or twice every weekend, I bypass it for 15 minutes just because I'm an addict. And sometimes, you're just addicted
a little bit.
Yeah, you got to scratch that itch, right? But the reason for me to focus more on LinkedIn in 2025 has nothing to do with politics, has nothing to do with the algorithm, has nothing to do with harder to grow followers.
We already know you're an Elon fan, so it's not like out of spite or something like that.
Exactly. It really is solely to do with the business that I want to focus on for 2025. There are more customers and clients of that business on LinkedIn than there are on Twitter. I need to swim a little bit upstream from all the products and services and stuff that I've sold in the last 2 or 3 years, predominantly on Twitter. I need to swim a little bit more upstream, and there's more bigger agency owners, and there's more bigger software founders and bigger agency salespeople and bigger agency CMOs, software CMOs on LinkedIn. And I want to go chase those people on LinkedIn instead of chasing, a lot of the startup newbie folks that tend to be on Twitter. There are 100% huge whales, huge players on Twitter. I've met a bunch of them. I'm lucky to call a bunch of them friends. I had 5 people that I met on Twitter at my wedding. There's amazing people on Twitter. I have nothing knocking. There's just an even bigger pie to eat. On LinkedIn.
Yeah. And it's marketing 101, right? Where are my buyers at? You don't need to be on Twitter and X and LinkedIn and YouTube Shorts and Instagram and, all of these things. You need to, it's kind of why at Business Builders at our agency, we always talk about plan, produce, promote. People come to us and they're like, we need SEO help, or we need Facebook ads, or we need to get on TikTok. And we're like, hold on, time out. What is the plan? And what are you going to produce there? I don't know. And so, all right, let's dig into your messaging. Let's dig into your buyer persona, all that sort of stuff. Quick shout out, shameless plug here. I am repurposing a course that I built for the sales team internally at teamwork.com. They got rave reviews. There's like 12.5 videos to it. I tongue-in-cheek called it Becoming a LinkedIn Legend. So if you are wanting to learn LinkedIn, especially the organic side and the personal growth side of networking, even if you're not in sales, but you're building your personal brand, whether you're a CEO or a marketer, couldn't encourage you more there. And Max, your journey is continuing there. So we'll keep talking about this. If you go to my personal website, loganlyles.com, it's just LOGANLYLES. I've got a wait list there for the Becoming a LinkedIn Legend course. Very affordable, tactical stuff to help you get started, from profile optimization to some automation tools you can use, but how you can actually grow organically there. So I'll leave it at that.
Can I get to the top of the wait list for whatever?
Yes, absolutely. Anything for my co-host, just as you said earlier offline this week. I love it, man. All right. Well, I think we are where we're at on time today. I think we're going to save the mailbag segment for next week. We're going to be digging into your newsletter lead funnel that came from Growth Hacks Weekly. So I'm really excited to unpack that next week. For now, we got to hit number 5 because I want to spend a little more time here as we round it out. And like we said at the top, we'll play with this. Some weeks we might have multiple segments. Some it might be 1 or 2. But we have to talk about why, quote unquote, agencies suck was proven wrong in 2024. As a guy who lives and breathes agency life, both wearing that hat for our agency and leading a community over at Agency Builders, tell me why, because I need to spread the word, man, with my network on why agencies don't suck.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you, I keep just immediately rambling every time, but let me ask you, like, what do you normally hear as the reasons why people don't like agencies or hate agencies?
Yeah. I mean, one of them is you'll hear that, from folks like you did with the person who hired you and brought you into marketing. Every agency I've dealt with has sucked. Now, if you're an agency and you're listening to this and you get a lead and that's the first thing they say, don't get happy ears too much, because they might suck. Not personally, and I'm not saying on a moral or a human level, but maybe as a client they suck. They want zero risk. They don't understand, how marketing works. And that's our job to educate folks. It's why we do what we do. So that's the first thing I'll say is sometimes it's the clients that suck. Not to pass blame or pass the buck, but that happens. Also, I think that so many agencies, and this is something we talked about on the Agency Life podcast, and we're doing more on the Agency Builders podcast, is that agencies get into this rhythm of this is what we do. We get paid to execute this thing. We know how to do this thing really, really efficiently. And they lose sight of we're not just doing this thing to do this thing. We're not posting on Facebook. We're not writing blog posts. We're not designing graphics for the sake of doing it. We're doing it to drive business results. And we can kind of get our heads down and just focus on accomplishing the task. And our clients don't care about the tasks getting accomplished. They care about when they have to go to that board meeting or to that review meeting with the CEO quarterly to say, here's what we spent on the agency, here's what they generated for us, here's why we're going to keep spending money with them. And I think, I did a fair amount of saying where the clients can go wrong. I think this is the biggest spot where agencies can go wrong if we get too focused on the execution and doing the thing that doesn't actually lead to the results that our clients want, which ends up the client saying, well, at least your agency suck. I don't know if everyone does, but so that's a long answer to a short question, but those are the first two things that came to mind for me.
Yeah. Both of those are, I would say, top two, if not top three, two out of the top three things that most people say. Mm-hmm. I've heard so many times, like, I'll never hire another agency again. And to your point, normally it's like, well, you might be the problem. It's like, if you've gone on 100 dates and you haven't found one person that could potentially be your partner in life, like, you might need to do some self-work before you go back out on the dating scene.
Right. That's a good analogy.
But the reason why I said most people got this wrong in 2024 is because I think people finally woke up to what a good agency is. And so I think you started to see a lot of really big performance agencies and SEO agencies actually shrink their talent size last year because people didn't want as many large agencies. They don't want like a 500-person agency, and they don't want to just be assigned to some random person that this company plucked out of college and trained. Yep. On the other side of that, to bring this conversation full circle, like a good comedian does, they take the punchline from the very first show, they repeat it at the end. You're like, oh my God, to bring it full circle, right? People woke up to, hey, if someone's guaranteeing me 30 leads in 30 days or 30 blog articles that deliver XYZ results in 3 months or whatever, how good are they at their job if they need to do that in order to get me as a client, right? I think people really started to find the middle ground between a bunch of kids that are just desperate for clients and will do anything to get their first 10 clients by creating some sort of guarantee or offer, and the larger ones who just assign you to a random person and you're just a number in a large machine.
Yeah. The extremes are both bad, right?
Yeah, they exactly. It's a better way to say it. But I talk so fast. That's another reason why I have Logan here. So he'll just make everything I say.
I talk too slow. I can't listen to myself at 1x.
It's funny. But yeah, I think people really started to like recognize that there's a middle ground of agencies. There's these boutique agencies that are like 10 to 15 people where you get some FaceTime with the founder who really is the brains and has their way of doing things. Yep. They're not running your account fine, but you get some FaceTime with them. They're on some calls. They're really teaching a very small group of people that way. And I saw a huge increase in agencies that intentionally say, hey, we only work with 10 clients at a time. We only work with 20 clients at a time. And I think that movement from, to bring this full circle, money back guarantees not working, to we only work with 20 clients at a time, that really started to shift as 2024 went on. And I think people are now starting to wake up to like, okay, maybe not all agencies are bad. It's just the ones that I chose before on the opposite ends of the spectrum that really suck. And it's the same thing with dating, to go back to the dating analogy that you liked. It's like, not all men are terrible. Not all women are terrible. Like 99.9% of men suck. But But like, there's 1%.
Off by one. Yeah.
But there's 1% that is good, and you just gotta go find that 1%, right?
Yep.
So that's why I think people really started to wake up and realize maybe it's not agencies, it's the agencies I was hiring were either too junior, these people were rookies. They just try to get as many people in with a money back guarantee as possible and just shoot the shit, or they're too big and I'm just a cog in the machine.
Yeah. I mean, on the latter part, within my first 30 days at Business Builders, taking over sales at the agency, we had a new client who came on board exactly that way. They said, we were working with an agency. That agency got acquired by this big agency that most people listening to this would know by name. And I know folks over there, and they're like, we feel like a number. We feel like a cog in the machine. We've been switched account managers, umpteen times already in 90 days or whatever. Yeah. And, they went through our marketing blueprint process. They came on board. Business Builders, we're a team of about 18. We've got, 36 clients at a time, something like that. Like, we kind of fit right in that middle that you're describing. And so not to just be like, oh, look at us, but I can see that in the market from these sorts of conversations. So anyhow, good stuff, man. Well, this has been a ton of fun. It's only going to get better from here. I had high expectations and they've exceeded mine. If you want to submit questions to the mailbag, if you want to get other updates from Max and myself, I would say follow us on LinkedIn. Like we both said, that's where we're both active. You'll always be able to find our LinkedIn profiles linked in the show notes of the episode. And then Max, I'm assuming growthdaily.com is the best place for people to stay connected beyond that, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Go to growthdaily.com. We are going to be unpacking that lead funnel that I mentioned that I had some questions for Max on after reading a great edition of the newsletter just earlier this week in the next episode. So make sure you're subscribed, connect to Max and I on LinkedIn, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Max show. It takes me and my team hours to produce it every single week, but it only takes you 15 seconds to hit that share button and text it to a friend, drop it in a Slack group, or share it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or any of your favorite social platforms. I appreciate you taking the time to check out my content. Have an awesome day.